Yes.
All right, so I think we'll go ahead and get started because we have a lot of wonderful content to cover. And also just for those of you on Zoom, thanks also so much for joining. Please let us know if you have any issues with the audio. It's a lot of our first time doing a hybrid session. So I just wanted to say, so I'm Steph Garburn. Some of you I've met before. I am the new director of medical student research, a new role that just started this year. I'm so excited to be in this role and meeting many of you. I am so happy and so grateful to my colleagues, Lauren, Laura, and Hillary from the Health Sciences Library here at Brown to be really, this is all of their work in presenting this, but I just wanted to say that I know most of you are medical students. We did invite some other people, so I'm not sure if there's anyone else here, but this is hopefully the first of one of many sessions to come in the future between the med school and the health sciences librarians about building everyone's research skills. This one on evidence synthesis is going to cover a lot of different topics, so don't feel overwhelmed, but definitely you have amazing resources at your fingertips with the health sciences librarians and librarians. And just a little anecdote. So my second published peer-reviewed paper ever was a systematic review, and it was a lot more work than I thought it would be. I was also a student. It didn't get published until I was a resident, full disclosure. It was a multi-year process, and hopefully we can learn some tips about how to do something like this as a student and do it efficiently. And also, you know, these are one of the best ways to contribute to science. So it's really exciting to be having some guidance. I didn't really have a lot of guidance in this, but evidence synthesis is great. You don't need IRB review the vast majority of the time. You usually don't need funding. It can be completely student run. You don't even necessarily need a mentor, although I definitely suggest it. And then also, if any of you guys are interested in getting help with this, always you can reach out to me and also any of the libraries. I'll offer that up. So thank you so much, and go ahead and get started.
Okay, can you guys hear us okay? Awesome. What about on Zoom? Still playing around with this. Okay.
Yes, I've got my mic on. I'm going to go ahead and ask for your forgiveness if I have to stop and blow my nose or something. We are a little bit
My kid got us both a little under the weather. Our apologies. My apologies. That was my kid. Yeah. But I'm Lauren Fletcher. My current title is Medical Education and Clinical Engagement Librarian. My office is here in the medical school. In the library, I'm office 155, so at the very end. And Laura?
Yeah, I'm Laura Haygood. I am Health Sciences Librarian for Public Health. I don't exclusively work with public health, though. We all support each other's areas within the health sciences. And then we have our new colleague.
Oh, and I'm new. I'm Hillary Krause. I'm the Health Sciences Librarian for Clinical Support, and I am also in the Chamberlain Library here in this building. I'm 151.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Lauren's going to advance the slides for us. If you missed it on the previous slide, I will point out that we have the link to the slideshow, and you're probably going to want to save that because there's a lot of links in this presentation. I also want to, before we get fully into this, let you know that we have some library items over here. There are postcards that have all of our resources and services on them, contact information, and we also have stickers. So there's stickers for just like the Rock, the library in general, and then we also have Chamberlain Library stickers. So feel free to grab them.
Yeah, please eat the pizza and all the desserts as much as you want.
Okay. And as we already did, we've already introduced ourselves, so we can jump straight into our learning objectives today. By the end of this session, you should be able to recognize the types of evidence synthesis. That includes multiple types that we'll go over today. You should be able to identify the components of a systematic review, and you should be able to locate relevant guidelines, methodologies, and resources. We'll start with a bit of history and background, though. Due to the rise of evidence-based practice in the 90s, clinicians discovered a need for a way of summing up all the literature on a topic. That's when British epidemiologist Archie Cochrane, who is really the originator of the idea of systematic reviews, stated that it's a great criticism of our profession that we have not organized a critical summary by specialty or subspecialty, adapted periodically, of all relevant randomized controlled trials. His work was really the foundation upon which the Cochrane collaboration is built. You may have heard of Cochrane. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. They're a nonprofit organization focused on synthesizing high quality evidence. And you may have noticed that I said high quality. That's also part of the systematic review process. It's perhaps a little bit of a crude saying, but garbage in, garbage out. You want to make sure that anything you're putting into your review is good science. And so critical appraisal is an important part of that process as well. In recent years, a lot of specialties outside of medicine have discovered the importance of this filtered systematized information. And so we've gotten a lot of new review types. So we don't have to just look at an intervention. We can look at the scope of literature on a topic or other types of reviews. And those have really grown in recent years. So why is evidence synthesis important? Evidence synthesis is helping to really distill the information on a topic and focus that particular intervention so that clinicians can make those rapid decisions. And just by the numbers, you can see how much publishing is going on around the world. If you do the math here, there are greater than or more than 2 million new papers written every year and 29,000 systematic reviews a year. Something has to be done with all of this. We need a way to synthesize that. And that's where we come to today. What is evidence synthesis? According to Evidence Synthesis International, evidence synthesis is the interpretation of individual studies within the context of global knowledge for a given topic. So evidence syntheses are really the evidence base that we use in evidence-based medicine. Evidence synthesis is a broader term that applies to multiple types of review methodologies. So most of you have heard of systematic reviews, but that's only one type of evidence synthesis. And moving on to the next slide, sorry. Most people are already familiar with a literature review. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But a literature review can cover a wide range of topics. It's not generally considered to be comprehensive, and it doesn't intend to be. However, the review types we'll discuss today are on the screen: a systematic review, scoping review, rapid review, meta-analysis, and umbrella review. So first off, we'll take a closer look at systematic reviews. A systematic review aims to gather all of the randomized controlled trials on a topic and determine what these studies have concluded in combination. So the resulting document is considered to be the strongest evidence you can use to make health decisions. Of course, as we mentioned, that critical appraisal piece is a key part of that. In order to conduct a review, you need to gather all the information, screen out anything that may be irrelevant, extract the data, and then you can draw conclusions. So some of the essential qualities of a systematic review is that it should have a focused topic, it should have a systematic and comprehensive search, and your search should be reproducible. We talk about reproducibility in science all the time. That's where the reproducibility comes in reviews. And the most common issue that I see when students and faculty want to meet and talk about doing a systematic review is that often they don't actually mean a systematic review. They're wanting to look at the scope of the literature. And that's where we get the scoping review. A scoping review can be a little bit more broad. It's not necessarily any easier than a systematic review. Sometimes it's actually more work.
Oftentimes it's longer and more difficult to do because you're looking at a larger range of material.
So it follows a similar methodology, but it's really just a change in terminology. Scoping review is indicating that we're looking at the scope of literature rather than a focused intervention. And next, meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is a statistical combination of the results of quantitative studies. A meta-analysis has to be conducted in conjunction with a systematic review. You can do a systematic review and not do a meta-analysis, but you cannot do a meta-analysis without doing a systematic review. So the systematic review is how you find all of that information that you are then combining statistically. And that image on the page is a forest plot. This is the statistical representation of the results of a systematic review. I don't know if anyone has noticed this or not, but the logo for Cochrane is also a forest plot. It's just a little more stylized. And then next, the rapid review. Rapid reviews seek to be quick but not dirty. So they're trying to be fast, but they don't want to be, that's actually a quote. But the idea is that they're still going to be well done. They're still going to be methodological or methodical, and that there is methodology to follow for that. Those are generally only going to be used when a rapid response is imperative. So you can't just say, I don't have time to do a full review, I'll do a rapid one. No, rapid reviews are often when there's like a policy decision that has to be made or something along those lines where it has to be done quickly. And the final review type that I'm going to mention today is the umbrella review. An umbrella review is kind of like a systematic review of systematic reviews. So we are seeing more and more systematic reviews being published. Sometimes they're published on the same topic. We generally recommend that you look and see what has been done before you start a review. But sometimes enough time has passed that it needs to be updated and redone. And that's where we can do an umbrella review and kind of compare all of those studies together. And in addition to the 5 we talked about here, there are several other review types that we won't go into a lot of detail about, but those are the ones that you'll probably see most commonly. We have here on the screen the comparison between a literature review and a systematic review. You can see that a literature review is going to be a very broad, or can be a broad topic, whereas an evidence synthesis project is going to be much more focused and well-defined. A literature review is not usually going to be comprehensive. A lot of times when I've written literature reviews, you may look at the first 4 or 5 pages in the database and you're like, I found enough papers, and you stop looking. That's not the point of evidence synthesis. The aim is to be comprehensive. Study selection, what you decide to include and not include, that's got to be very explicitly laid out with your inclusion criteria. So you need to think through those things when you're going to do a review like this. You're also wanting to take into consideration quality. I've mentioned that critical appraisal piece a couple of times already. And then the synthesizing, what you're actually doing with the information you're pulling. So this kind of gives you an idea, the difference between the two. They are not the same, and that's where we get a lot of questions sometimes where people want to do a systematic review, but they don't have the time to be comprehensive. And that's usually the biggest issue that we see. And so keep that in mind. Systematic reviews take a lot of time, so plan ahead. And Lauren, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so let's get into the nuts and bolts really of how to actually do these. So we're gonna first look at methodologies and reporting guidelines. These are the basis of how you're gonna start anything with a review. But first, some quick definitions. What's the difference between a review methodology and a reporting guideline? Because we see this conflated and mixed up a lot when we look at reporting of systematic reviews. So all systematic reviews or evidence synthesis projects should be conducted according to a methodology. These have been established by corporations or programs that have laid out step by step for you what you should do for each step of the review process. So they describe in detail the standard methods of conducting every stage of the review process. And we'll show you in a second what some of those might be. Whereas reporting guidelines are how to report your review methods and your results. So very similar ideas, but one is how you should do it and one is how you should write it. So that's kind of, think of one as your how-to manual and one is your your rubric. That's kind of how I try to think about them. So there's a couple places to go to find standard best practice methodologies. Cochrane, as we mentioned before, is kind of the founding center for evidence synthesis. They have the most standardized methodology that exists out there for any type of systematic review of interventions. That would be the Cochrane Handbook of Systematic Reviews of Interventions. When we send out the slides, that's a direct link to the handbook that we have access to that you can look through if you're interested. Cochrane also has the Cochrane Library of Systematic Reviews and Randomized Controlled Trials, because that's what they focus on. And
Forest plot.
yes, forest plot. Nice and pretty. Our second standard location to go to find some of the most prominent methodologies would be the Joanna Briggs Institute, often just labeled as JBI. They are based out of Australia, but they have probably the most well-renowned, well-known scoping review methodology, and the one that the library tries to support the most often. And again, that's a direct link to that methodology as well. For reporting guidelines, we use PRISMA 2020. So PRISMA stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analyses. So again, this is how you're writing it. It's just a guideline to tell you how to write your manuscript and what needs to be in your manuscript. So it's actually a 27-item checklist that's accompanied by a flow diagram that looks like this. Very similar to any type of diagram that you'd see in other research methodologies where you're telling how participants made it through a trial, for instance. This is the same thing, but instead of participants, you have studies. So think of it in the same kind of manner. PRISMA themselves have done a fantastic job for us and have extensions for a lot of different types of things. So we have an extension for protocols, which we'll talk about in a second. So what should go in a protocol, an extension for what should be in the what you should do for searching, an extension for what should be in a scoping review, and every other possible type of review that you could imagine that's out there, they have an extension for it for how it should be reported.
And I do want to just emphasize that we highlighted that this is a reporting guideline. One of the most common mistakes that we see in papers is that people will say, we conducted our review in compliance with the PRISMA, and you're not conducting your review that way, you're reporting it. Now, that said, it's words, you know, they either way, you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're reporting out what you did, but it's very important to remember that you can't report what you didn't do. So look at the reporting guidelines before you start.
And here is the conceptual framework of all the major stages of doing a review. And we will be going through each one of these, not in super detail, because this is just kind of the basics, but to give you an overview if you're interested in doing an evidence synthesis project, what is going to be required of you. So first and foremost, you need to gather a team. Minimally speaking, a review team on any type of review needs to have 2 people. Every stage, basically from 3 on, needs 2 people to complete it. So that's your first task would be having a team. And additionally, within that team, you need to think through, do you want to add other people to that team? You can. Would you, if you're doing something with a much more clinical focused topic, maybe you would like to have a clinician on the team that is an expert within that field. Possibly have a librarian on your team to help you with your search. If you are hoping to do a meta-analysis with your systematic review, I would consider having a statistician on your team to help you with that as well. So that's the kind of things you need to think through in the beginning. What type of people and what type of things would you need to complete this? The second would be to formulate your question, which seems like a very easy task, and it's not. Initial question formulation goes through trial and error process. There's acronyms you tend to follow, PICO, anybody? Yeah, ooh, PICO. But there's a lot more. There's PO, there's SPICE, there's PCC. I mean, there's all different kinds of random things that help build that out. After you've done all that small little legwork, then we get into developing a protocol and registering your protocol. We'll talk about that on kind of the next slides of why that's important and what that means. And then you go on to design and run a search, which we will also talk about. Screen, select your studies, and then appraise the risk of bias, extract your data, synthesize your findings, prepare your final report. 6 steps that typically on average take 12 to 18 months on average is the standard saying.
67 weeks is a study that assess the amount of time, 67 weeks on average.
So. But this is generally what you'd see structurally wise with, if you're looking at an evidence synthesis paper. These are some like the major headings that you'd find on your Prisma checklist: a title, an abstract, a plain language summary, background, methods, results, discussion, etc. Very similar to the same types of headings you'd find in any other type of research article. But what's going to be a little bit different here is the methods. So when we're writing out or reporting a systematic review or an evidence synthesis project, our entire method section, we're telling the reader, this is what we're going to do. And then in our results section, this is the answer to everything we just said we were going to do. So we need to focus on finding your question. How are you defining your question? Is it PICO? Is it PCC? Is it SPICE, which all stand for different things? What explicitly are your inclusion and exclusion criteria? What's your search strategy? What databases did you search? And you'll see that databases, multiple. Study selection, what was your process? How many people did it? Did you use a review software? Did you use Excel? Did you pick and choose? Hopefully not. What was your data extraction? So in our methods, we're going to say, this is the type of data I plan to extract. And then when our results, you present that extracted data. And then what are you going to be using to do appraisal and risk of bias? So our protocol, just like with doing other types of research, we need a protocol to say, this is what I plan to do. So that way, when you're finally reporting it out and you're having it published, they can go back and see, did you do what you said you were going to do? Prisma has a protocol checklist, which is very nice of them to tell us exactly what needs to be inside of that. There's also an adapted one for a scope and review protocol. But we try and register our protocols. 2 reasons. One, to put it out there that you have this topic on hold. You are planning to do a review on this topic. So if someone else doesn't come in and swipe your topic. Reviews are hot commodities. You want to put your name on what you want. And we also do that to see if someone else is currently working on a review that you're interested in. There's no need to do 2 of the same exact thing. And so registering your protocol kind of saves you from doing something someone else is already currently doing and stops someone else from doing something you're currently doing. We tend to register our protocols. Yeah, there's a question.
So if you register it and someone sees that and they know they can do it faster than you, how does it stop that person from just doing that?
So the question is, if you register your protocol and someone sees that and thinks they can do it faster than you, what's stopping them from swiping your topic and doing it faster? Ethics?
Yeah, I mean, there's no official governing body, but it is publicly out there. And when you register your protocol, you can't like make changes to it without it being like all of that acknowledged and everything date stamped, just to keep that transparency. But yeah, I mean, it could happen. Somebody could do it faster than you. And that's where we also recommend registering, because hopefully they're being ethical. But it also helps you to keep that timeline in mind and try to kind of plug away and not take 3 years, knowing that that could happen. I have seen editors say, we just had a review come out about this last month. How did you take into consideration their findings? And teams have been like, we didn't, like we wrote this before that paper came out. And so you have to go back and adapt and see what you're going to focus on and change. So
But
if you
that's not
can
to say
avoid
don't
it.
register it.
Yeah.
You should register it. It's not a mandate by a lot of publishers, but it's becoming a very highly suggested situation that you, when you're writing your manuscript and submitting, you put in the registration number or a link to your registration of your protocol.
I'll also say that teams that have a very well-defined protocol have a much smoother review. Like every time that people are like, we think we're gonna do this, then they end up halfway through and realizing that they're not finding what they thought. Like if you put that thought and care into the protocol from the beginning, then the rest of the project's gonna be so much better.
There was another question back there.
Yeah, if there are two very similar systematic reviews, wouldn't that be like an application of like reproducibility or seeing how close they are in terms of the same results that came out?
So the question was about if there's two reviews that are very similar. Is that an opportunity to see the comparison between the two of them? And yes, that does happen kind of often, because the thing, especially like when you're building out your review and you're building out your protocol, the likelihood that two reviews are exactly perfectly the same becomes slimmer and slimmer because of how explicit you have to be in inclusion and exclusion criteria. But that's where umbrella reviews are becoming much more popular, because that's exactly what they're looking at. I've done an umbrella review before, and you have to cast a little bit of a wider net, but we're doing that because there might be reviews that are, one inclusion criteria away from being the exact same thing. And that's how we're trying to do that combination thing. Because the goal is just not to have the exact same thing. So something like one or two criteria away, technically you're doing something a little bit different. So you have different results. So yeah, it's kind of up in the air and another choice to have. So for systematic reviews, umbrella reviews, we tend to register in Prospero. It has its own website, it has its own template. For scoping reviews, we tend to register in Open Science Framework. There is a brown branded space for Open Science Framework and a formalized registry now in OSF for this exact purpose. And if you would like to, you can also publish your protocol. I have done that before. I know, Laura, you've done that before too. Those are BMC systematic reviews, and Cochrane database of systematic reviews are just two places that you could publish a protocol. There are plenty others. This is optional, you don't have to do it, but it could be a nice way to get an additional publication. And having someone in a editorial function or peer review function looking at your protocol is very helpful, because they will see things that you maybe didn't see beforehand that will make the end result of your review much stronger. So what comes after a protocol? All the good stuff.
And I get to talk about that because that's my favorite part. Just kidding. We all love the searching in the library. So just with this first slide, I wanted to show you what a typical search looks like. This may be how you search in Google Scholar or in PubMed. You put in a few different synonyms and see what you get. This isn't what we would consider a systematic and comprehensive search, and we'll take a look at that together. So when it comes to developing your search, there are a few things that you want to keep in mind. Like I said, you need to be comprehensive and systematic. You can't draw conclusions that represent the body of literature on a topic if you didn't find all the literature. So that comprehensive piece is imperative. This means that your search is going to be aiming to be more sensitive rather than getting just what you're looking for and nothing else. You're going to get a lot of irrelevant topics as well. That is just part of the process, and that's why you do the screening to cut a lot of that out. The next one is Boolean operators. You will need to use those when you're building your search. If you don't know what I mean by Boolean operators, you already use them, or, and not. They tell the relationship between terms. So if I'm looking for children and motor skills, and is my Boolean operator. And you also want to, as I mentioned, focus on sensitivity over specificity. So we're not wanting a highly relevant set of results, we're wanting everything. And so that means your search is going to be more exhaustive than you think it may be. Sometimes that means that we're including alternative spellings, like let's say British spellings where we have some extra U's, like in the word color, or, pediatrician, we have an A in there. So you want to think about those kinds of spelling changes. You also want to think about being exhaustive with your synonyms when you can, and other techniques that we use to really aim to be comprehensive. And then finally, there is a really great resource for finding some of those terms, and that's what we call search hedges. Hedges are like a string of terms on a concept that someone else has put together, and they're sharing that openly for you to use. So an example of that would be
Lower middle income country is the greatest one.
yes, like it has a string of all the different synonyms. It's been tested. A lot of these hedges have been validated and published. And there is a link on the page to a list of all sorts of search hedges. Most of them are probably demographic focused. So if you're looking for low to middle income countries, or if
It's
you're
usually demographic/geographic or by study design. So if you were only wanting to find randomized control trials, if you were only wanting to find systematic reviews, an umbrella review, those are really common and really popular.
So just to give you an idea of how we start building a search, we create a concept table. And you can see here that we have our concepts. This is one that I did on motor skills in children. And so you can see children and motor skills are my far left column. And then I looked for the mesh terms. If you aren't familiar with mesh, you should make an appointment with your librarian. Mesh are medical subject headings, and they're kind of like hashtags for papers. So in social media, you search, I want to see all the pictures from
Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras,
2024.
yeah. Well, you can do the same thing with medical research. Indexers will go through and index new publications and give them those tags. So that's why we search for mesh terms. We also want to do our general keywords. So you can see here all the different options for child, for motor skills, and building that out in the table just helps me make sure I'm not missing anything when I start putting that into my search. Also going to just give you a few quick search tips. These are things that are helpful in general searching, not just for systematic reviews. You always want to think about all of the different synonyms, all the different ways of wording your concept. You want to use index terms. Those are those mesh subject headings that I just mentioned. They're called something else in other databases. In Embase, it's called mtree, but it's the same thing. It's an index term. We already talked about Boolean operators. Those can also include things like parentheses or quotation marks. So parentheses are going to work just like they did in math, where you have your order of operations. So if you're wanting to search terms together, you might put parentheses around them and then combine that with the rest of your search phrase. And truncation. Truncation is one that you may not be familiar with, but we had it in the screenshots of the searches. Truncation is just a way to shorten a word to the main stem. Sometimes I'll say like the trunk of the word, truncation. And then you could tell the database to fill in whatever it needs after that. So an example of that would be like therapy. If you truncate after the P with that little asterisk symbol, then that's going to get you therapy, therapies, therapist, therapeutic, all those different derivations. And then finally, paying attention to what field you're searching is also really helpful. Sometimes you want to search every field, but there are a lot of times that you don't. You know, fields include things like funding source and the title of the journal and some other things that the author's name, you know. These are things that you may not actually want in your search, so you just want to pay attention to that. And so I wanted to just go back to this typical search again, so you can see this is kind of how you would do this. And then I will show you how I did a systematic search on this. And this was based off of one of those hedges. Now you'll see here that we don't even include motor skills on the screen. And that was because there just wasn't space. This is just finding all the literature about children. One thing that I do, and you may notice, is that I search line by line. So that's why there's that 1, 2, 3, and you can combine at the bottom. That's not required. That's just a way that
a lot of my mind straight.
Yeah, it helps us to be organized, but you don't have to do it that way. So if you put all of that on one line and put a whole bunch of parentheses between everything, if you've ever copied a large PubMed search that had all those parentheses in it, that's okay. You're not wrong in doing it that way. This is just clean and a little bit easier to read. And once you've started building your search, you've got to think about where you're going to search. Hopefully you've already figured that out in your protocol, but there are a lot of different places you can look for information, and you should be looking in more than one place. If you're aiming to be comprehensive, you've got to search multiple databases. Unfortunately, there's not one place where you can find everything. The Cochrane manual, I believe, advises a minimum of 3, and it's PubMed or Medline, which are, we'll talk about in a minute. Yeah. And then Embase, and then Scopus or Web of Science. And then there may be some subject-specific databases that you need to look at. PsycInfo, CINAHL, Allied Health. I've used Sport Discus when I've had like sports medicine type topics.
For education.
Yes, medical education. So there are a lot of different databases that you want to consider. If you don't know what databases to search, that's something we'll like. Yeah, that's what we're here for. I did want to clarify what the difference is between a database and a platform. You have to report all of this, so it's important for you to know. When I said PubMed/Medline, Medline is the content in a database, and PubMed or Ovid or EBSCO are the platform you search that database on. So you can think of it kind of like searching the web, but are you searching the web via Safari or Chrome or Firefox? Like you have a slightly different interface that you're using. That's what that platform is. And when you report your search in your manuscript, you need to document all of that. So you'll say, I searched Ovid Medline, or I searched PubMed, I searched CINAHL via EBSCO. Those pieces need to be included when you report. And once you've built your search strategy in that first database, usually you're going to want to start in like PubMed or Ovid Medline. Some people prefer Embase, but you'll want to start probably with one of those 3, and then you'll translate that search strategy. So that's part of being systematic, is that you're searching the exact same way in every database. You're not going to say like, oh, I'm going to throw in all these extra terms in this database, but I didn't do it in the others. Like that systematic nature is important.
Now, once you've created that big giant search, like we had on the previous page for children, then you go each line, word by word, line by line. This database uses a semicolon here, and this one uses a period here, and this one uses a single quotation, this one uses a double quotation. That's what it means to translate, is having to go line by line by line, and if you add something, say you're going from PubMed to Embase, and Embase has an additional word, and you wanna add it, well, surprise, you gotta go back to that original one and add that word back in there too. Cause we want everything across those databases to be as equal as we possibly can make it.
And sometimes subject terms vary between databases, so, that also is part of the investigation you're doing when you translate. This chart just kind of gives you an example. If you look at the top row, PubMed indicates title and abstract in that TIAB with the brackets around it. But in Ovid Medline, you're putting parentheses around the whole string and just saying dot AB T comma TI dot. That's the syntax. So you can see how it's just a little bit different. This is probably like very confusing and overwhelming, and that's okay. Talk to your librarian. We can help you with this. There's also a link at the bottom for the Polyglot Systematic Review Accelerator. It can help you with some of that, but it's not perfect. So if you use that to help translate some of that syntax, like anything, you need to double check and make sure that everything was correct. But all that said, what we're talking about with the translation is we want you to be aware of this. We're not necessarily expecting you to walk out from here and do all of this on your own without ever talking to a librarian or anything else. These are just things that we want you to be aware of, and reach out to us and we can give you some guidance or collaborate with you. And I think that's yours. Yeah.
Okay. So after you've done all that work, then you're gonna run those searches. You're gonna create them all, then you're gonna run them all in the databases, save all your results, and put them into some kind of software. That could be EndNote, that could be proprietary software like Evidence that the library supports, or even an Excel spreadsheet. I've seen people do that too. But you're gonna have to go through 2 different rounds of screening with those titles. The first round of screening is title and abstract. So you're taking every single one of those results and just looking at the title and abstract and saying, yes, no. Yes, this is probably relevant. No, this is obviously not. And go switching through them that way. Everything that makes it through that first round through yes, then goes through a second round of screening where you're reading the full text of that article and making that final determination. Yes, this explicitly fits every single qualification or every single one of my inclusion criteria and should be included in my final study, versus no, this might have one thing wrong and I can exclude it. Because at that point, we need to give a reason why we're excluding something. So it could be the wrong population, could be a wrong intervention. They didn't look at the outcome the way you wanted them to, but we need to tell why we're doing that. And everything that makes it in has to stay, it's supposed to stay in. So you have to be really careful in this stage and making sure you're paying really close attention to what the people in the article were actually doing and if it fits your inclusion criteria.
And that's where it's very helpful to have really thought through your inclusion and exclusion criteria ahead of time. A lot of times I've seen teams get to this point and be like, oh, we also didn't want this. Well, that changes things, and that's going to be a little more complicated. So think through and write that protocol.
And this is where we're also starting to get into everything needs to be done by 2 people or more. It doesn't matter what 2 people. It could be 2 people, it could be 5 people, it could be 10 people. It could be 2 different people for everything. 2 people need to do all of this stage. So I briefly mentioned Covidence. That is a software that the library provides access to. It is a pretty all-encompassing systematic review management software. So you upload all the files of all the citations, and it takes you step by step. As you can see, you have a title and abstract screening phase. Everything that makes it through goes into your full text review stage, and then everything that makes through that gets into extraction. And then everything within that also gets critically appraised. So it just helps take you step by step. You can add multiple people to it. You can see how many people have completed certain aspects. It's a really great tool. It's super useful. And it makes the process a lot more streamlined. And it does a lot of the back end legwork for you.
If you have more than 2 people on your team, then it will automatically sort out when you're screening. You can set it so that every citation needs to be looked at by 2 people. So if you have 5 people screening, it's automatically going to sort out what you need to screen. You're not going to have to worry about duplicating work of someone else.
When it sorts through the duplicates, is that sorting through DOI that are similar or like the same, or is it like the author and title, or how does that work?
So the
They-
question's asking, when we upload the results, it automatically is going to start looking for duplicates. Because we don't necessarily need to look at the same article twice, and let's be honest, there's gonna be some databases you find your article in all 3 of them. And so the question was like, how is Covenants finding duplicates?
They look at multiple fields and make that comparison. So it's not just DOI.
I think it's DOI, journal title, article
Primary
title,
author.
author.
Yeah.
But they tell you, like, there's a link that you can look at the duplicates, so if you wanted to double check Covenance's work, you can. More often than not, what I have found is they've missed a duplicate, then they inappropriately put a duplicate in.
I think they err on the side of caution there. So, and that is something that you may see in that second round screening. An exclusion criteria may be that it was a duplicate study.
And then, so we have data extraction, like we said, can be done inside that too, and so can risk of bias. So risk of bias is really that critical appraisal of the articles inside your review. So those that made it in, you should see what quality evidence they are and make a determination of, are they gonna stay in? Or are you gonna exclude articles due to being low quality? There is no right or wrong answer to that. That's a team decision. And you make those determinations. But you don't have to do this on your own. There are tools out there that have been validated for this exact purpose. So Cochrane has risk of bias tools. They have them for RCTs. They have them for observational studies, non-randomized, all different kinds of things. JBI also has their own, and there's also the Critical Appraisal Skills Program, which is called CASP, and they have some for all different kinds of study designs as well. NIH has some, so there are a lot that exist out there. Again, get librarian guidance on which one might be pertinent to your view. Data extraction and synthesis. So you have to think through what you're going to extract ahead of time. So in that protocol development stage, what kind of data are you hoping to pull from all the articles in your review? What are you trying to present to your audience with that information? And that is a link to the Cochrane handbook about general type of information you should be pulling from studies. At a bare minimum, you need to pull study characteristics. Where did the study take place? When did it take place? What kind of participants did they have? What did they do? At the bare minimum. As you go on from there, depends on what type of outcomes that you're looking for in your review to report, depending on what kind of things you're going to pull from those original articles. Again, this is a 2-people process, just like the others above. You have to work independently to extract the data, and then you compare, because everyone is human and everyone makes data errors. Can't tell you how many times reviews, like I've been with review teams where someone put 0.9 instead of 9. So you always want to have that double person to check what you're doing to make sure everything is correct. And like I said, you can do it all in Covenants, which is super great. So instead of having to migrate between multiple platforms like we used to have to back in the day, you can do it all in one place. And then you have to prepare your final report. So this is where you would go back, like we had from the beginning, back to your Prisma 2020 checklist. That's what you're going to use as your rubric for writing your report. And what's also great about Covenants is that flow diagram that we talked about earlier. They build one for you, so you don't have to. And they fill in all the numbers from everything that you've done in your review so far. So that's very nice of them. So you don't have to do it. And you can also export all of your findings from your data extraction and your risk of bias into CSV files, so you can then manipulate that data and present it however you'd like to. So why are librarians talking to you about this? And why should you come talk to us? And that's because this is pretty much what we do all day, is make searches. And run searches. We are experts in search development, in translation, and citation management. All of us have been to extensive training on how to do systematic reviews. Question from the Zoom
We have
chat.
a question in the chat that I think would be a good idea to address. So someone asked, do you suggest using Chat GPT for data extraction? And I thought you might want to address that one.
The question to our, well, I guess they already know the question on the Zoom, Chat GPT for data extraction. I actually just had a team ask me about using AI tools for data extraction in particular and risk of bias. And I could say there, as of my current investigations, there is no solid option for an AI tool to extract data appropriately for multiple types of article types. The only things that exist are you have to purchase, and they only work for RCTs. They don't work for any other type of article. I think the technology is going to get there. I think that's where we're going to be headed, but there's nothing currently out there right now that works well for data extraction in an AI sense.
And I think that's probably a good consideration for anything with Chat GPT or AI, is it can be helpful for exploration. It can even give you some ideas, but the technology is not quite there yet to rely on it, especially for something like a systematic review where you are trying to create that highest level of evidence. So it'll probably be coming eventually.
Is Abstracker, I was recently on another review, is Abstracker using AI, and do you guys use Abstracker?
All right, so the question was about Abstracker, which is another systematic review management tool that is actually from Brown, from our Center for Evidence Synthesis at the School of Public Health. And I've used Abstracker with some teams, and it kind of uses AI. So Abstracker only works for title abstract screening. I will preface it with that. Only works for title abstract screening. How it works is you input your your first citation batch, the biggest one. You set some type of limit of how many you have to do, and based upon what you've told it from that practice set, it attempts to title and abstract screen the rest of them for you. And they even tell you themselves, it's not perfect either. But I have had teams, plenty of teams that use it. And it is produced here by Brown. So it's probably the one I would suggest for any type of AI interaction with doing screening. But again, it only does title and abstract screening. So every other spot of the process of a systematic review or scoping review, you'd still have to do yourself.
And there are other systematic review management tools that do use AI. Covenant actually has,
Yeah, started.
yeah, they have some for randomized controlled trials to filter those out. Rayon has an option where it will show you like the most relevant papers or the least relevant, which can be really helpful when you're getting bored with screening and you're like, okay, I want to see 5 of the most relevant, and then I want to see 5 of the least relevant, you know, like what it takes. So there is some use going on. In my experience, Covenants is probably one of the best tools out there, and compared to doing this in an Excel spreadsheet.
In Excel and going between like Excel and EndNote back and forth, so much easier. Another question from the chat.
We have one follow-up regarding AI, because you mentioned that there is an AI that maybe works with RCTs.
Yes.
So they ask which AI works well for RCTs.
Email me
It's built into Covenants.
Oh, okay, there's a separate one. There's a separate one out there. It is proprietary, so you have to pay. Email me, because I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's in an email I sent like 2 days ago.
Okay, great.
And Covenants has just recently launched that. I haven't had a
Covenant-
team use
I
it
have.
yet.
I've had a team use it, so it has 2 functions now. One, it will screen out RC, or no. Yeah, it either screens out RCTs or only keeps RCTs, and it will also try and tag RCTs. So you can use it in a couple different ways. But it's an option when you start a Covenants review, it asks you like, what's the title of your review? What type of topic are you doing? It's gonna have 2 little tick boxes where it's like, do you want to do this? Do you not? And that's what it is. So back to why you want a librarian, it's because of those questions right there. We are specialized in this. We also peer review each other's searches, because we are human and fallible as well. So we review each other. We have multidisciplinary knowledge. And those other people that, control the evidence synthesis will tell you you should use a librarian. So with that, we do have a review service from the library. Eligibility is all of you. So anyone that's faculty, staff, students, researchers affiliated with Brown University, including our clinical faculty, residents, fellows, interns, can all utilize our review service. For students doing course or program related research, that caveat, if it's for a grade or a degree, typically, we limit you to our level 1 service, which is this. So level 1 service is a consultation based level where we help you in 1 to 2 hour consultations, help you develop your topic, develop that question. We can give you guidance on the search. But ultimately, you and your team are responsible for writing that search, running that search, and doing all the factors. The librarian just provides guidance and consultation. We do generally ask that if we provide a greater than 2 hour plus service that you acknowledge us. That's always nice. But it's not a requirement. Our level 2 service is a librarian as a part of the review team. We do both levels pretty equally. So as a part of the review team, the librarian is much more hands-on. We help you write your protocol. We can overview that. We can provide guidance on if it should go into Prospero or OSF. We can help you determine which databases to search. But the biggest difference is that with the librarian as review team member, we build the search, we translate the search, we run the search, and we put everything into Covenants for you. So all those first couple of steps, we kind of take care of for you. And then the rest of the way, we provide some methodological guidance. We've been in a lot of these before. We've been on different types of reviews and we know them. We know what Cochrane's asking. We know what JBI is asking. So we can help guide you along with that process. And then we can help write particular portions of the final manuscript, particularly items number 6, 17, and 16A from the Prisma checklist, which is what's your search, where did you search, and how many things did you find? We can help do that. Also edit and approve the final manuscript before submission. And so it's just a much more of a collaborative, it's a team process. And that's the end of what we have. We do ask that you please take a few minutes to provide us some feedback. You can use the QR code if you'd like to. And I'm gonna leave it on this slide, but the next slide is just, do you have questions? So we'll ask you right now, do you have any questions of anything that we covered, or can we clarify anything?
I did want to chime in. One piece about using Covenants is that you don't have to use a citation manager. would probably want to use it for writing the final manuscript, but you're not having to keep track of all of those citations in EndNote or Zotero. Covenants is doing that for you. So I think we had some questions on the form.
Yeah, we
about
had some
citation
questions on the
management.
form about citation management and, I'd say if you're doing a review, it would be good to have a citation manager, whether that be EndNote or Zotero, either would work fine. It's just nice to have those, but you can do some of that through Covenants as well. I know there was a question on some of the forms coming through about, I know there was something about like an NIH, literature review service. They only are gonna work with NIH researchers that work for the NIH. So it kind of is institutional. So if you go to a different institution after Brown for residency or other things, then their library probably have some type of review service that you could utilize as well. This just happens to be ours.
And sometimes people will work with collaborators outside of their university if their university doesn't have a service. So we only require that one person be affiliated with Brown. I know this was a lot of information. There's really no way to teach this without it being like information overload. But I hope if you forget everything else, you'll remember I should talk to the librarian and send us an email. We also have a group email address, which I guess we could go ahead and advance to. This is probably the best way to get a hold of us because it goes to all of us. So if I'm out on vacation or going to a conference, then someone else can get back to you fairly quickly.
For projects that you worked with that medical students are leading, I'm wondering, you know, when we're thinking about potential topic for a scope interview or a systematic review, are there a certain number of like papers that we would potentially be looking at? Because some topics around say there's such little research, and others is like so much that you would have to synthesize. So I'm curious if you have any idea, suggestions about students that you've seen that have been successful and how big the body of work is that they're looking at.
So the questions regarding medical students leading the review, and I would say this for any student leading the review, is there a preferred or suggested topic level breadth of successful projects? And I would say personally, from teams I work with, no. I've had plenty of teams with students as the primary author who are looking at larger things that have, you know, 2,000-3,000 articles initially that they go through, or even more. I've also had teams with only 300 articles and they're not done. I always tell it depends on the team. Every review, in my opinion, depends on the team. How fast that team wants to work and get it done. Nothing is impossible. I'd say I feel like it tends to be a little bit harder for students to be the lead on a true, like really in-depth systematic review, just because the development of the question requires sometimes such a clinical knowledge base that they may not have yet in that question development to really narrow down that question to get a really true narrow enough intervention style question. But I think scoping reviews are a good option, and there's plenty of different ways to potentially limit the total number of articles that's not necessarily based off of just the topic itself. It could be a geographical situation or doing age, other things like that.
And that's part of what we do is help you focus that topic. It's very rare that we need to help somebody go broader. Usually they're needing to be more narrow. And so we could do a quick search and be like, okay, well, if you really want this topic, you're gonna be screening 16,000 papers. And that usually changes people's mind. I have had teams go forward with 16,000 citations.
Yep.
I would guess that my average is somewhere between 1 and 4,000.
Mhm.
I've had some as little as 400. But it's totally dependent on the topic and it's dependent on your team size. I do consulting work with American Heart Association. We're updating the resuscitation guidelines. And for those, sometimes they'll have several reviewers. And so they can kind of speed through that work a little bit more quickly. So
Yeah,
that's something else. Like if you know you want to go a little bit more broad and you're going to have a lot, then you might recruit some additional screeners.
and that's what I've seen too, like. Any of my projects that tend to have larger total numbers for screening. End up recruiting more people to help them screen.
And I also wanted to chime in about medical students leading. I previously worked for medical schools before I came to Brown. And generally, if there was a faculty advisor on the team, then they were also a little more successful because they had that guidance. Not saying that you can't do it, but that does generally help. And especially if they've done a review before, then they can give you some of that guidance as well.
And if anyone wants help with that, feel free to talk to me. I've done 7 systematic reviews. I'm not an expert by any means, but
Yeah,
definitely
one of
got
the,
into the weeds.
yeah, one of the
and know
works.
what to do. So I'm probably not the content expert on everyone's topics, but I am pretty happy to work with you to come up with a narrow focus. I totally agree. It's better to go more narrow than you think you should go, and then it's usually that's actually a good sweet spot where you should be asking your question.
Is there a chat question?
Well, first of all, you're getting a lot of thank yous and,
yeah.
this is fantastic.
guys.
In the chat, just want you to know, you're getting a lot of adulation here. So we just have one more question, which is, it was mentioned that this is a series. What are the next topics being presented and what will be covered?
I think we discussed a few options. One of them was things like use of citation managers.
Yeah, we talked about doing citation managers, potentially, for you med students, more basic, like in-depth PubMed searching, so a level 1 PubMed searching class and then a level 2 PubMed searching class where we teach you the fancy stuff that you can use in residency and other places like that. But those are what are on our minds.
When I've worked at other medical schools, I've done sessions on establishing your scholarly identity, especially online. So kind of helping you think about all the places where you may need to have an account, like with Scopus, where you're uniting all of your publications, especially if you have a name change or anything else while you're pursuing your academic career. There's a lot of that you can kind of craft your persona for.
And we're taking suggestions, so let us know if there's a topic that you would be interested in. Our team has, calling them out, does data management and data visualization and research impact and things like that. So if those are avenues that interest you, let us know and we'll work together to make that happen. Is that it? Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Can we eat pizza? I think it's all the cookie. Yeah, it's fun with cookies. It's so really important.
100%
So, when you're looking to see like that. Most of them were